ladies and gentlemen, Noah Baumbach.
Woo-hoo!
So, this was my first time seeing the movie in 35 millimeter as the Lord intended, and I feel like, you know, one of the things I love about you is that you do keep continuing to shoot on film, and I feel like it gives your movie such rich textures. Talk a little bit about the decision to shoot on film, what you think it gives you, what it gives the audience.
Well, I mean, for me, I prefer it for many of the reasons you can probably imagine, but it's also, I mean, in some ways, I think making movies for me is so connected to watching them, you know, growing up, watching movies and that's how I experience movies. And so I think I did shoot a couple movies. Now a little while ago, I shot them digitally, and I felt I just didn't even have the same kind of emotional reaction to my own material when it wasn't on film. I mean, it felt different to me in some way. I mean, I could get over it to make the movie, but it never felt the same. And so, I mean, for me, that's really that's the best reason I can give. I mean, we could talk about why I think film, you know, in so many other ways is, you know, is special. I mean, it is one of those things. It's like, you know, we all get used to the thing we have, and you know, and digital has taken over our lives in so many, you know, everywhere. So we get used to things, and you know, I get used to the photos on my camera, and then I take photos with the camera, the film camera, and I look at those, and I suddenly look on my phone, feel kind of, you know, don't have the same, you know, feeling. So I just it's you know, but I do think it's so much for me is it's about connecting it to what I fell in love with the first time.
Yeah, well, this movie is such a love letter to movies, and that whole final montage, I feel like just, you know, as we've talked about before, like because Clooney has done so many different kinds of movies, that montage is sort of such a great summary of all the things we want for movies. And I love the style of this film. Like, I love how it's so realistic in some ways and so specific in its observations, but there's also this poetry and kind of lyricism and beauty to it. What kinds of conversations did you have with your department heads about like what you wanted the style of the movie to be?
Well, I think in always we sort of think that the story kind of dictates how we do it. So we don't think so much about, oh, the style is X and the style is Y, you know. But so it's more like looking at, okay, well, this is the script, you know, has him walking into these memories, or it has him, you know, so how are we going to do that? You know, how are we going to do it in a way that feels, you know, sort of true to the language of the movie that, you know, we want to make, and then, you know, once we start to establish things that we are making. And, you know, all of those things were done practically. There's no CGI, any of that. We just build the sets up against each other, so the planes connected to his acting class from his past. So we would shoot the sequence on the plane, you know, George and Adam and, you know, Laura and Emily and everybody, and then George would get up and walk, and he'd open the curtain, and the rest of them would all be waiting on the other end, you know, and young Charlie, who plays young Jay, would start reading the Chekhov, and George would walk out, and then we would shoot past. But it took a lot of planning and a lot of testing and trial and error to kind of come up with exactly the way we wanted it to feel. And it's ultimately a very simple solution, but it's a sophisticated simple solution.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, you say it's simple, but then, you know, it had, like I was reading about how you sort of did the thing with him in the mirror, and it's like we think we're looking at a reflection, but we're actually looking at him. And explain how you did that.
Well, the one when he's in the train bathroom, he's saying J. Kelly, he goes down to wash his face, and so, you know, initially you see him and you see his reflection, and that's a real mirror. And then he goes down to wash his face, and then the camera kind of moves around, and we see his daughter Daisy and her friends on the platform running to get on the train. Now, it's all a set, so it looks like a platform, but it's and then the camera continues around, back to the mirror. But during this period, George has ducked under the crane arm with the camera and come around to the other side, and the crew has pulled out the real mirror and put in just a fake a frame of a mirror, so there's no glass. So when we come around to what is apparently his reflection, it's really George playing his reflection. So he comes up from the sink and he says, "Gary Cooper," but now we're just shooting George again, but he's just on the other side of the mirror. And so then the camera pushes in on him, and he's saying his sort of incantation, and then he looks up and sees something in the corner of the reflection of the mirror, which is the lens of the camera, and turns around, and there's Riley Keough and the care center, which is a set built on the back of the bathroom set. I hope you're following me. Raise your hand if you're not. And the camera keeps going past George. Now also because he's wearing a sport coat and shirt that he's been wearing on the plane. Jacqueline Duran, our custom designer, has made it one that has magnets and Velcro, so you can tear it off quickly. And he's doing the lines while he's doing that to Riley, but he's off camera. And as we're sort of pushing it on her, he reappears, and now he's wearing a shirt, which he's wearing underneath the other jacket and shirt that he wears in The Memory, which is a kind of reddish cowboy shirt. And then we shoot that scene. And we would do it all in one. We'd shoot both all in its entirety. It certainly bonds a crew. It's fun, but I think also you feel a difference whether you don't have to know how it's done, but there is something to feeling something tactile and practical that I think there's a kind of grace to it. And we were trying to approximate in some way memory and how memory is always kind of available to us. I mean, it might take something to trigger it, but it's somewhere in there, and it's also a construct, as we know too. And they are like our little movies, and so that there was a kind of like movie quality to the memories, was deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of established that movie quality right out of the gate with that great opening shot. I mean, where did the idea to start the movie that way come from, and how logistically challenging was that to pull off for the actors?
Well, when I wrote it with Emily Mortimer, and I remember her writing, we were sort of talking about, well, maybe we start on a movie set, and we were sort of thinking sort of that you would get the kind of world around Jay, and you would kind of hear Jay but not see him until he kind of appears in the shot at the end of this sequence. But initially we were just writing, and we weren't thinking, oh, it's going to be one shot or anything. But I remember when she wrote in, I started getting dry eyeballs from nowhere. She was just sort of saying thing, and I was just like, I don't know. There was something about that, because it had nothing to do with anything, that I really, I don't know, it just helped me see what this scene was in a way. It's sort of all this kind of loose information, and seemingly unrelated things that then all kind of coalesce when we come around. And, then I bring in Mark Tilsley, the production designer, and he had the idea, well, why don't we do it in forced perspective? So the set that the movie within the movie is on is these cutouts. It looks like nothing. I mean, it really doesn't look like anything until you get the right angle, and then suddenly the bridge and the skyline and the backdrop, and it all looks like something. And, it's kind of old-fashioned in a way, but it is also, it was right for the story we were telling. That sequence, I should mention actually the quote that opens the movie, the Sylvia Plath quote,
was also part of the shot, but that wasn't ad-lib, that was actually done in black on glass. So we had real white smoke that we would billow up, and the white would reveal the text, and then we would hold it hopefully long enough to read. We just sort of read it aloud while we're watching, and then we would rack focus, and then there's the man, Stanley Townsend, in the background, who says, we're coming to the end, and the camera moves, and Emily with the eyeballs, and then we go into the sequence. And so, it took a lot of planning too. It was months of Lena Sandgren and I, the DP, and I would, while we were prepping, would go down to the stage with like PAs and accountant, whoever was around, and we would start to block it out, and then we hired people locally who were in the sequence, and when they were available, we'd bring them in, and we kind of built it for weeks. And then when George and Adam came for 2 weeks of rehearsal before we shot, and so then they joined. And so by the time it was the first day of shooting that we shot, so we shot the beginning of the movie the first day, and it was great because everybody was kind of really ready. And the first take we did is not the take in the movie at all, but it wasn't bad. I mean, it didn't seem credible, and so we just kept working on it, and getting it quicker and shorter and sharper. And again, it was a great way to begin, because it got everybody sort of focused and together. And it was enjoyable because it had that thing where it's you're kind of, whenever you do a long one take thing, you're sort of biting your nails to the end, because of course if it's going great and then someone screws up 2/3 of the way in. Yeah, it was but like you said, it also sets a kind of language, both I think visually, but also the orally. I mean the way of the dialogue of that sequence too, the sort of musicality of the way people are talking and what you need to focus on, and there's all this sort of excess stuff that also kind of, I think it sort of helps you, we're sort of, I guess in some ways, I would say teaching you, but helping you understand the language of what the movie you're about to see is going to be.
Well, I know that you wrote it with Clooney in mind, and I guess the highest compliment I can pay his performance is it's impossible for me to think of this movie with anybody else but him. So, did you have any kind of plan B? Like, what if he turned you down? What were we going to do?
Yeah, I kind of didn't allow myself to think that way. I had it in mind only after I feel like we had the character. Once we'd been writing it for a while and writing the character, and I think, I knew instinctually that I wanted to have, it would have to be, a kind of equivalent movie star to Jane Kelly had to play Jane Kelly. And so at a certain point it was like, okay, well, who is this? And George was the person we thought of. There's not a lot of options. I think, for that age range and that, I guess I wouldn't have made the movie. Actually, I don't think I would have made the movie.
Well, and then you also wrote the part for Sandler, and I'm a huge fan of Meyerowitz stories, and I was wondering how working with him on that, did that inform your approach writing this, knowing you're writing for him, and kind of knowing who he is and what he's capable of?
Yeah, sort of unlike with George, I knew George a little, but I was not, I didn't know him, intimately. Adam I know very well, and after Meyerowitz in particular, we became very close, and our families are close, and so I was very much writing a part that I actually felt it was very close to Adam. Sort of the person I now knew, he is incredibly loving and loyal and generous person, and it was a way for him to play something, I felt like that was kind of close to who he is, but hidden in somebody that, in a way was very different from who he is. I'm always interested, or often I should say interested in working with actors in ways that they can play things that are kind of close to themselves, but masked in, the character or the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other movies we're showing in this series here, because both Clooney and Sandler, I've heard say, they were interested in working with you from when they saw Squid and the Whale, and like there's something about that particular movie that seems to like make actors want to work with you, and it's after showing it here at Cinematheque. And I remember when that movie came out, like I had been a fan of Kicking and Screaming and Mr. Jealousy, and then it felt to me like, I don't know what the exact age, it felt to me like it was a while before Squid and the Whale came out. I was so excited when Squid and the Whale came out, and it felt like kind of almost like a new beginning for you. It felt like a movie that really kind of supercharged your career. I mean, did it feel that way to you at the time?
Well, I mean, I think, I was living in the present, so I was, there was a period where I hadn't made a movie for a while, and I was having, after Mr. Jealousy, I was so young, I was in my, late 20s, but I think I sort of had a point where I had made 2 movies in my 20s, and then felt I was struggling in some ways, but not just struggling to get something made. I also think I was really sort of struggling to figure out what I should be making in some way. I couldn't have told you that at the time at all. This is all in retrospect. But this sort of that sequence of just that time in my life, I think, led me back, to my childhood and inspired this in the Whale, which I think I found myself as as you say, I think I found myself as a kind of writer and subsequently a director. Sort of more, it was like the first time I think I was able to really communicate, some version of what I was trying to say. Actually, I found a way to express it, both in the script and in the movie itself. But in the moment, you're just thinking, what the hell am I going to do? I thought it was sort of, I had a thing where I sort of felt in a way like, well, maybe my career has begun and ended before, in a very short period of time. But I think that in some ways that struggle actually led me to dig deeper and sort of find myself a little bit.
Yeah, well, I always wondered about you because I know from interviews I've read with you, and you're like a very wide-ranging cinephile in your tastes, and you like all kinds of movies. And I always wondered if you ever saw like an alternative path for yourself where you would do more like genre movies and stuff. Because I know you like science fiction and thrillers, horror movies, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think when you're young, you kind of do it. I mean, when I was growing up, I did have this sort of feeling of like, well, because I did like so many different kinds of movies. It's like, well, maybe I will make, some genre film or some, but, and then I think that sort of making movies when I was that young, I still hadn't quite formed myself, I was still sort of maybe, I still had a foot back in the sort of person who, wasn't really yet ready to make them. I had lots of ideas, I had a lot of ambition, but I not that I wasn't ready to make them, but I don't think I quite knew who I was yet. So, I think then I kind of found more the way I wanted to express myself in the medium, and it's the way I've been doing it.
Well, yeah, I really loved the documentary you made on Brian De Palma. I was wondering if, like, taking a deep dive into his stuff, what did you learn from that? Was there anything that kind of informed your approach going forward, movies you made afterwards?
I mean, there might be, but it wasn't conscious. I mean, I think I'm close to him as a person, and I love his movies, so I really wanted to just, go through his career with him. And I mean, initially when I interviewed him with James Paltrow, we really just did it almost for posterity. I wasn't thinking it was going to be a movie necessarily, and then a few years later, I started to compile it and make it into a movie. But, I mean, essentially, I think no matter filmmakers, whatever you're doing, you're all sort of. I always find there's commonality of like, the essence of what we're doing is quite similar. Even doesn't matter, kind of what kind of movies you're making, but when people pointed it out to me, they'll say, "Oh, I see your Brian's influence on you in these places," but I didn't. It's not conscious.
Well, it's like, I mean, it's probably reading too much into it, but I almost felt like Marriage Story in some ways can almost be read as a thriller, because it's like there's so many places in the movie where you're just like, no, don't do that, don't. And you can see people like heading towards their own destruction.
Well, there's definitely is that aspect in that movie. I mean, that I was aware of things that seem kind of innocent in the time, in the moment, and later are used, against you. Like if you're watching a thriller, then there's a close up of the knife just early on, and you think, so Marriage Story, it did have those elements. I mean, those elements. I mean, for anyone who's gone through a divorce, those elements aren't just there. If you go through a divorce with lawyers and things, it is like a thriller.
Well, then I also want to ask you, we're also going to be showing Francis Ha in this series, and much like Split the Whale, like in a certain way, Francis Ha, I remember seeing that, I saw it at Telluride when it premiered there, and I remember feeling like, again, as a fan of yours, it felt like, oh, this is kind of like a cool new, like it felt like you were rejuvenated in some way. I mean, were you, and what was, like talk a little bit about the experience again, because that was one of your digital movies.
It's my second rejuvenation. That one actually I loved shooting digitally. I think that was, we did it on the Canon 5D, which is a consumer camera, and we went through I worked with Aero Cinema, who I don't know people know who he is. It was an incredible cinematographer. He passed away just a few years after Francis, but he shot. He shot Earth and Zodiac, and he did Greenberg with me, and Margaret Wedding with me, and he did Elephant and Last Days, the Gus Van Sant movies, and he was really brilliant, and this is big guy, he was from the Bronx, and I was from Brooklyn, and we kind of, I think, we kind of, something we recognized in each other, and he's very soft-spoken, but so smart, and I told him sort of what I wanted to do, which is I sort of had this notion of like, why did we just tell anyone we were making a movie? What if we just said this is the movie? Like if we had a mic right now and a camera, this could be the movie. Why are we going through all the other stuff? Let's just do that. And I also thought, I wanted to do it in black and white. And I thought it would offer all this freedom. There would be limitations for sure, but there would be a lot of freedom because we could just keep shooting, And he and I sort of developed this sort of process that we were going to sort of treat the raw footage, the digital footage. And it's actually, if you get the Criterion of Francis, there is a whole featurette on what we did. But he it was sort of the beginning of when he was sort of got sick, and
So Sam Levy, who had worked with him, shot the movie with me, did a brilliant job, and that is how we did it. I mean, we shot for such a long time, and I would restage things, and we would change things, and we had like there was that we had the T-shirts made up of like the what's it called, the New York Film Academy. So if we got caught like on the subway shooting, we just all put on the T-shirts. You know, we're just, you know, students, and you know, and Greta wasn't yet recognizable then, so it was sort of, we could, you know, and we didn't show the script. We didn't show the script to anybody. We worked with everybody. Just had their piece of the movie, which I've done on a few movies, and I did have Jake Kelly for several people as well. But it actually has a little bit of I mean, I became aware of later with Jake Kelly. I mean, there is a little bit of similarity in that it's sort of the process of this person going on this journey. I mean, with her, she's bouncing around apartments and homes, but it's like people come in and then they go out and you never see them again. You know, there's this sort of, she's the continuity, the way Jay and Ron in some ways are the continuity. And we had a great time making the movie. It was kind of, there was like, I didn't really feel like there was magic on it. And but you know, we went to Paris, we went to Sacramento, we went to I guess I'd probably say it the other way. Because I was going to end with we went to Poughkeepsie, New York. But I went to Poughkeepsie, Sacramento, Paris, and yeah, we just shot everywhere. We just got so yeah, I do think there was something. It was a new. I wanted to try working in a new way and a new medium, and meaning the digital. But I think also it was a new kind of movie for me too. I mean, it's related to things I did before, but it yeah, there was something. You know, it's that thing. Sometimes you don't know that you kind of find a way to change things for yourself, and you're only semi-aware that you're doing that. And when I look back at it, I kind of knew instinctually I wanted to sort of do things in another way. I do think the movies I made after were informed by that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great movie. I'm really looking forward to seeing it again on the big screen when they show it at the Cinematheque. And, you know, for me, to pick my favorite Noah Baumbach movie is sort of like asking parents to choose their favorite child, but I do think Jake Kelly is maybe the best thing you've ever done. So I really appreciate you coming out and taking the time.